What if I told you that instead of tackling a complete song, you should focus only on the parts you can actually play? It might sound strange, but I think it's part of the secret to making learning songs on the guitar feel much less overwhelming. And one of the most useful parts you can master right now as a starter guitarist is the G to E minor chord change. Nail this chord change and suddenly tons of classic 50s and 60s tunes are within your grasp. But first, let's have a quick refresher of those two chords. And there's a good reason why we should. Because if you look at the two pairs of diagrams that you can see on the screen now, you'll see that they are both G and they're both E minor. But there is one key difference, and let's get into that right now. So both the G major and E minor chords have a couple of common ways that guitarists like to play them. So let's take a quick look at the G major first, and then we'll deal with the E minor in a moment. So on the screen you can see G major. This is one version. It uses the second, third and fourth fingers. So there's your fourth finger, third finger and second finger on the fretboard, and you can see what strings they're on, and you're going to strum all 6 strings. Now the second version uses first, second, third finger, the first finger, second finger and third finger on the same frets of the same strings, and again strumming the whole chord. But one version and another version. So let's look at the E minor and the two possible ways, or two most common ways I think of playing them. The first one uses your second and third finger, and you can see on the diagram where they are on the fretboard. The second version uses your first and second finger, and again on the same frets of the same strings of the fretboard. Now when I show you the G to E minor transition, I'll be using the first way I showed you for both chords. Now it's not that this one's any better or more fantastic than the other version, but this is just how I play it. But remember, what I'm going to show you works great no matter which of the two ways you like best. So let me introduce the concept of an anchor finger. And this is a finger that stays on the same string at the same fret when you're changing between the two chords. Sometimes it might be one finger, maybe even two. And between the G and the E minor chord, with the first way of playing the chords, it's the second finger that is the anchor. And this makes the change a little bit easier, because when you have a finger that is on the fretboard at all times, it makes life a little bit simpler, because you then able to go from one chord to another chord without having your fingers kind of flailing everywhere wildly as you go from one chord and then you try to find your way back to the next. And try to keep the second finger lightly pressed on that string as you move between the other fingers. Don't lift it too far away, don't take it off at all actually. And the thing is, consistent practice is what will make this feel more natural as you keep going with this. So don't give up. So looking at the first way of playing G major, so you're using your fourth finger, your third finger and your second finger. This second finger is our anchor finger. Okay, this is the one that's going to stay rooted to the fretboard and to make the chord change to E minor much easier. So how we do this is this. There's a nice G major chord. So you're going to take off these two fingers, take them off. Okay, that's the first stage. Next thing that you're going to have to do, and I'll explain in a moment why, is you're going to have to shift this finger just down a little bit. And down is going in that direction. So shift that finger back. Now that gives a bit of space for you to put your third finger here on the D string at the second fret. Okay, like that there. So you've got a bit of space, and there's the chord change. That's nice. Okay, let me demonstrate again. So you've got your G chord, take these two fingers off, slide the second finger down a little bit, and then tuck your second finger, second fret of the D string, the fourth string, and then you have that there. So why are we shifting back? So let me show you what you're going to get. So there's your G chord. That sounds good. Now if you don't tuck in, I don't know, is that some kind of Spanish guitar sound? I don't know, but it's not an E minor chord, right? Or worse, you might get this, some buzzing. So you need to shift that finger back, that second finger back, to give you the space to tuck in that second finger there. And then you'll get, that's nice. So in terms of E minor to G, well, obviously we're going to kind of be doing the reverse. All right, so there's E minor. So what we'll do is we'll take off this finger. This is your third finger. Take it off. You'll have to slide this up a little bit so it's right there. And then you'll put the third finger and fourth finger down on the E strings. Okay, low E string, high E string, and then. So again, back to the E minor. So there's your E minor. Take this finger off, all right. Now slide up a little bit, and then second and third and fourth fingers on the low E and on the high E. And this kind of sliding down a little bit and sliding up a little bit is very important. As I said, you want to be able to make sure that your fingers are as close to the fretboard as possible, and not as close to the fretboard, as close to the frets as possible. All right? One of the things you want to make sure is it doesn't matter what chord you're playing. When you do play a chord, your finger should be not on the fret. You don't want your finger on the fret. You want it just behind the fret. And of course, when you're going to the E minor, you do have to slide down. So you do, of course, your finger is not that close to the fret. There's a bit of daylight there, isn't there? And you can see it. But it's still sounding out. And then you've got the space. So let's just do a little bit of practice going from G to E minor. G to E minor. Let's keep this nice and slow. Just a word on the practice actually, before I forget. We're doing this kind of in stages. You know, I showed it to you in stage. So for example, the G, lift off the two fingers, slide down, give yourself some daylight here, tuck in and play, and then lift up, slide up, put your rest of the fingers on for the G chord. Now, that's a really nice way of practicing the chord. You know, you don't have to be doing this all the time. One thing you can do is when you're on your own, you're sitting down, maybe you're watching the match, just do that. Just put the fingers on the chord, take these two off, slide down, tuck in, wait a moment, take off, slide up, put down. And just practice just doing that hand there 5 minutes every day and you will improve. Now let's practice. So we'll keep this nice and slow to keep to build up your confidence. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is very much slow practice, and I think, you know, when you're starting out, when you've only been playing a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, this is really important because you want to build up muscle memory. And muscle memory is when, you know, it just over time, the more you do it, it just becomes natural. Just like tying your laces, driving a car, walking downstairs, you know, it's just very natural. You don't need to think about it. That's what muscle memory does. And that's what you get with practice. And I think it's so important that you practice, because a lot of people give up because they don't practice and they say it's too hard. Hey, why don't you learn guitar directly with me on a learning platform called Till? It has video lessons for faster progress, and you'll be able to get the structure and the feedback you need. For more information, there's a link down below in the description. We'll be looking at how this G to E minor progression pops up in some songs in just a moment. But first, let's have a look at how this anchor finger technique works with the other fingering for these chords. So if we're playing G like this with the first, second and third fingers, it's now the first finger that is the anchor. Right, so you'll take off that finger and that finger, the second and third finger. I'm exaggerating a little bit by having them out here. You'll then slide back just a touch to allow your second finger to come in for the E minor chord. Like that. And of course, going back, take off your second finger, slide that first finger up. Remember, up is going in this direction. Slide that finger up and then put the other two fingers down on the fretboard. Third fret and third fret of the two E strings, low E string and high E string. So it works exactly the same. Off, down, tuck in, take off, slide up, put the rest of the fingers down. Now, as I said before, consistent practice is going to make this feel a lot smoother and become a lot more natural in your playing. So give it time, make sure you are practicing. Now, a little tip here with regard to your wrist. You don't want it to be stiff like this, so you need to be a bit relaxed when you're going between the two chords. It just helps with the movement. Now, just a general reminder, when fretting a chord, you want to make sure that your finger is as close to the fret as possible. Not on, because that gives you a very muffled sound, but close. So just behind the fret, like so. So G and E minor are two very common chords and very common starter chords as well. And so they're used in so many different songs. And as I said at the beginning, you know, sometimes when you want to learn a song, you open your chord book, well, I certainly do, or you go online, and then you're just overwhelmed by a load of different chords, right? So this is why I recommend just, well, okay, if you can play G, you can play E minor, just look for those sections. And for example, Elvis Presley's his latest Flame, the intro is G to E minor and also the first part of the verse. So I'm just going to play a very simplified version. I'm not going to do the particular rhythm it uses. I'm just going to grab my plectrum. Here we are. And so, like so. A very old friend came by today, and he was telling everyone in town about the love that he just found. And Marie's there. And then the next chord is actually a C, and then it's followed D, and then back to G, E minor. Ka-jing, 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 jing. Another song is Van Morrison's Wild Night. Right, the intro is not G, E minor, but E minor, G. And it goes something like this. So it has the two chords, E minor and G, but it has a bass part playing over it, which gives it that real distinctive sound. Now, of course, it can also be part of a longer section. And for example, the intro to Elton John's Crocodile Rock is G, E minor, C and D. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, la, 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 la. There's your G and your E minor, la, 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 C, la, 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 D, and then it repeats. La, 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 and C and D again. So an important part of that progression. But of course, it's not just in intros. At the beginning of the Beatles' Not a Second Time is G and E minor. And it goes, you know you made me cry. I see no use in wondering why I cry for you. And G, E minor, G, E minor. And also another song. So we've been looking at them mostly with G and E minor kind of at the beginning, but in something like Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind, it comes towards the end of the progression. So it's like, the answer, my friend, is G, G, E minor. The answer is blowing in the wind. So it's slightly different. It's coming in towards the end of the progression. But this is the thing. I think it's G to E minor is a super cool chord transition, and it's used in so many songs, and I could go on. And if you want to find out other songs that use this chord, then check out this website here. It's called chordgenome.com, and you can type in the chords. If you know only 5 or 6 chords, you can type them in and it'll show you songs that use those chords. Something else is that, mastering these chord transitions, it allows you to play recognizable sections of songs. And also, playing it over and over and over again, not only is it just good practice, it's great chord transition practice, but it'll also get the sound of going from G major, which is like a happy sound, to E minor, which is a kind of dark sound. It will get that sound of major to minor in your ear. And I'm not kidding, but you'll start recognizing it in other songs that you hear the more that you do this. Right, so you're already improving. Great job showing up today. So if you want to dive deeper into more essential guitar chords, then check out this playlist right here. And don't forget to check me out on that learning platform, Till. Thanks so much for joining me today. Happy strumming. Keep practicing.